This weekend was the most important weekend of the entire offseason for fantasy football. Not only did we have the Flock draft last night that I absolutely crushed, that video will be posted on the Flock League channel on Tuesday, but also we got to see the starters in preseason. Sadly, we did have some injuries that we have to talk about, but let me go offense by offense and let me give you the important stuff from a usage perspective, because I can sit here and I can tell you, oh, Nico Collins scored a touchdown. That's great. Draft Nico Collins over Amon-Ra St. Brown. Honestly, that stuff doesn't matter. However, to give you an example of something that does is why don't we go ahead and look at what happened with Miami. So with Miami, you have a multitude of things occurring at the running back position. First thing is Alexander Mattison is going to be out for the season. Obviously, we've had that report for a while. However, why this becomes very important is Devon Achane suffers a soft tissue injury. Now, there's no official word of like, oh, he's going to be missing week 1. You can't draft him and you got to be pushing him down your board. No. I'm not going to tell you that. However, if we have any red flag at all with Achane, now we need to start looking at who the backup is in Miami. And this is what the preseason is so damn important for, is figuring out these depth charts and figuring out the usage for these guys. Now, from what I've seen in the preseason and what we are getting with all the PFF snap data is that Jalen Wright is playing over Ollie Gordon at the running back 2 slot. It's not like Jalen Wright's looked phenomenal. However, we do think he could probably be a pass catching running back and have upside for 15 plus touches if Achane were to miss time, especially with the Mattison injury thinning out this depth chart. So Jalen Wright could be an interesting running back to take at the end of your fantasy football draft. Now going over and looking at the Texans, obviously Joe Mixon remains on the non-football injury list. So a big thing we have to figure out is what's the running back depth chart beyond that? I mean, should we expect it to be Nick Chubb? Should we expect it to be Dameon Pierce? Obviously, Woody Marks will be involved. However, if you go through and you look at the Woody Marks profile, Woody Marks is essentially just a third down running back. So I think the expectation should be if Nick Chubb wins the job, Nick Chubb's going to be playing on first and second downs, and Woody Marks is going to be in there on third downs. Now, a lot of buzz coming out of training camp's been saying Nick Chubb looks old, Nick Chubb looks washed, yada, yada, yada. However, in this game, Nick Chubb did start and Nick Chubb did play the majority of the snaps with the first string. So I may or may not have taken Nick Chubb at the end of the draft in the Flock League. I may or may not be seeing if he is a starting running back week 1. But honestly, at this point, it looks like Mixon isn't going to be someone that's available to you at the beginning of the season. Now, let's move over to Carolina. With Carolina, it is important to note that Rico Dowdle is getting used as the third down running back right now. So maybe if you were sitting there debating between Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Walker, at the end of the 4th round of your fantasy draft, maybe you're a little more inclined to go in the Kenneth Walker direction. But obviously, this does make Rico Dowdle a more interesting running back late round flyer in your draft. And then at the wide receiver position, it looks like Adam Thielen's going to have a role. Thielen's out there with the starters. They kind of pull him early. They know that Thielen is good to go, which that doesn't really impact Tet McMillan. Tet's going to be the alpha wide receiver one here regardless. I mean, he's been with the starters just from the very jump. What does matter, though, is it may not be a spot where you can see both Leggett and Jalen Coker be relevant. Really, it's going to be Leggett versus Coker battling for the spot. You go back to the first week of the preseason, it was Leggett's job at first, then he gets in a fight, he gets tossed, Jalen Coker comes in, and Jalen Coker looked great. However, in the game yesterday, you actually still had Leggett getting that first crack at the job. So my money would be on Xavier Leggett over Jalen Coker. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but in reality, that probably only is relevant for your underdog best ball drafts where you're going extremely deep at wide receiver. And your regular redraft league, like the Flock League as an example, I don't even know if Xavier Leggett was drafted. Now going over to the Colts, the running back position is going to be important to figure out beyond Jonathan Taylor. The favorite for the job is going to be DJ Giddens as the running back 2. And Tyler Goodson just got injured, so very similar to the Miami situation. The running back depth chart beyond the starter actually did just get thinned out a bit. So DJ Giddens looks like a safe pick in terms of handcuff running backs at the end. And then looking at the wide receivers, Josh Downs is currently dealing with a hamstring injury. So you possibly want to move Josh Downs your rankings just a bit. I will let you know, I did not draft him in the Flock League. He went a little too high for my liking. And maybe you're really interested in Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren went surprisingly high in our draft, but I'm not going to make fun of the guy who drafted him because he played 34 out of 35 snaps with the starters in the first 2 preseason games. it looks like there's not a single tight end in the NFL, including Brock Bowers, who we'll get to in a second, that has as interesting of usage as Tyler Warren at this point. So Tyler Warren is going to be moving up my rankings. You'll see this in both the rankings on flockfantasy.com, as well as all the draft sheets that we have posted on the site as well. He's an elite tight end prospect that's going to have the exact role that you would want starting in week 1, where you may honestly be able to start the rookie tight end right away. Now, going over to the Packers, all the wide receivers are injured but Matthew Golden. Now, obviously, you also have Jordan Love injured. So we're not going to sit here and say like, oh, Matthew Golden is set to crush from the very jump. But you have Jaden Reed banged up in the walking boot. Even beyond that, you're sitting with Christian Watson, obviously done and dusted. Romeo Doubs banged up as well. So with Golden, he actually went much higher than Jaden Reed in the Flock League draft last night, which I'm not going to blame the person who took him. I think it was probably the right call. And then also an interesting note, and once our waiver wire opens up, a guy that I may go for is Marshawn Lloyd, who looks to be the clear running back 2 for the Green Bay Packers at this point. And he did have an interesting prospect profile going back to last offseason. Now, going over to the Patriots, I don't want to overreact just because a rookie running back looks good in the preseason. But Trevion Henderson looks like the dude. Obviously, you get the kickoff return for a touchdown in the first week of the preseason. The second week of the preseason, he just has an incredible highlight run for another TD. Now, he didn't actually start the game. I believe it was actually Antonio Gibson who started the game because Ramondre Stevenson's banged up. But we had Trevion Henderson going off the board at the beginning of the 4th round in the Flock League draft. And in reality, I think I may need to move him up my rankings to that point. You'll see this both on the draft sheets as well as my rankings on the site. It may look very aggressive, but as we get over to Breece Hall, I think I may actually be moving Trevion Henderson ahead of Breece. Now, obviously, if you want to stay up to date with all our rankings, both so you can crush your fantasy football draft and also make sure you're managing your team the way that you should be during the season, we are going to be updating our rankings on flockfantasy.com every single day until the end of the year. Not only am I going to be doing that, but all the other creators that we have on the site. If you wanted to get access to all those updated rankings, plus 50 custom draft sheets that I made to make sure that you can find one for your exact draft platform as well as your exact league settings, it's all on flockfantasy.com. We just dropped the best deal that the site has ever had. A $34 one-time payment gets you access to everything, including all the tools such as the My Teams page, such as the trade calculator, the trade finder. And if you use code FLOCK, you're actually going to be getting free start sit questions and trade questions for me to answer in the live streams that we are going to be doing every single night during the season. I'm going to leave the link to flockfantasy.com in the description and comment section. And again, I stand by. It's by far and away the best tool that you can use for your fantasy football league. And it's probably the cheapest as well. Now, sticking with the Patriots, Kyle Williams is still competing with Kayshon Boutte and Matt Collins. Looks like Demario Douglas is kind of guaranteed that third wide receiver slot in 11 personnel. Kyle Williams, Kayshon Boutte, Matt Collins are going to be fighting to play on the other side of Stephon Diggs. So I don't know if I'd be super excited about drafting Kyle Williams in either best ball or your redraft leagues. Going over to the Browns, I know that the comment section is going to hate this one. I hate this one as well. But based off the wide receiver usage so far, it may not look like Cedric Tillman's guaranteed to play 90+% of the snaps again. And that was really the only reason that he was ever interesting last year. So if Tillman's not going to be an every down player for the Browns, I don't know if he is draftable. Now, going over to the Eagles, Will Shipley has cemented himself as the running back 2 over A.J. Dillon. Had the great run week 1 of the preseason, and the usage in week 2 kind of looks like Shipley won the job. Going over to the Raiders, I'm seeing people panic that Michael Mayer's on the field some with the starters instead of Brock Bowers. Kind of looks like they're using Michael Mayer as a run blocking tight end. Brock Bowers maybe a little more on the field for obvious passing down situations. I don't know if I'm going to change my rankings much. I think if you're in a double flex format, I would prefer A.J. Brown and Drake London. If you're in a single flex format, I would still prefer Brock Bowers, and I'd feel comfortable taking him in the middle of the second round. Now, obviously, just make sure that you are adjusting to your exact league settings with how we value these quarterbacks and tight ends, which if you needed help with that, you can go to the draft sheets that we have posted on the site. Now, Raheem Mostert also has clearly won the running back 2 job in Las Vegas. So if you were looking for a handcuff for Ashton Jeanty or just a late round flyer at running back in your draft, it would be Mostert. And then Jack Besh is still playing with the backups. I mean, really, Can't rely on Jack Bech in a regular redraft league. I'm even seeing in Underdog best ball drafts him slide to round 18 / not getting drafted in every one. He may just be the straight up backup to Jacoby Myers this season and then the long-term replacement for Jacoby Myers in the future. Now going over to the 49ers, we know that this offense projects to be a top 10 offense in the NFL. We also know that Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings are injured, and we have no idea when they are going to be playing. So all eyes are on Sticky Ricky, and the dude does ball out in the first drive of the Niners game. He has 4 targets, 3 receptions, 42 receiving yards. Goes pretty early in the flock league as well. So overall, I think that this is one of the biggest risers that we have going into the season. I don't think we can guarantee that he's a super talented player, but the situation looks perfect. And then going over to Baltimore, one thing I want to point out, Keaton Mitchell not practicing with an injury. To see all the injuries that Keaton Mitchell's had in his NFL career so far, this is definitely going to be something that we need to monitor. Looking at the Cowboys, the wide receiver depth chart is shaking out to be interesting beyond the top 2 guys with Lamb and Pickens. In your regular redraft league, doesn't matter. But for underdog drafts, I took a lot of round 18 Jalen Tolbert, and it looks like Turpin may actually be the wide receiver 3 here, which could just be brutal for my underdog bags. And then when we're looking at Jonathan Mingo, his injury maybe does just clear things up for a wide receiver 3 to be viable in best ball in this offense. And then Miles Sanders is still alive with Jaden Blue's injury. We actually saw Miles Sanders get drafted at the end of the Flock League draft, and I think that's the perfect running back to take, see what his role is week 1, and then cut him if you don't like it after we get that data. Going over to the Los Angeles Chargers, the worst news I got, and I got this right before the Flock League draft where I went on tilt. The Big Q has a significant injury. Obviously, prayers up for Quentin Johnston. From a fantasy football perspective, this actually maybe makes Trey Harris somewhat interesting. Because if Quentin Johnston is taken out of this offense, at least at the beginning portion of the season, it doesn't matter if they add in Keenan Allen, because Keenan Allen really only played in 11 personnel. Keenan Allen may only play in 3 wide receiver sets. So that could open up Trey Harris to be in 2 wide receiver sets with Ladd McConkey, and especially on the field in 3 wide receiver sets. And then Ladd McConkey played every single snap. Even if Keenan Allen's on the field, they're just going to move Ladd to the outside. Going over to the Rams, we don't have a clear running back 2 here. Could be Jarquez Hunter, could be Blake Corum. If I had to take a read on the situation, maybe they're just going to use Kyron Williams as a 3-down bell cow. And if Kyron were to get injured, then they split the backfield with Hunter having the 3rd down role and Blake Corum getting touches on 1st and 2nd down. And then with the Jets, this is what's going to be brutal. I will let you know, sneak peeks, a very handsome guy in the Flock League took Braylon Allen because he needed some upside of running back. And Braylon Allen's getting used here in New York. Breece Hall only played 61% of the snaps with the starters, despite Isaiah Davis not playing. There were 5 3rd down snaps for the New York Jets with the starters, and Braylon Allen played all 5 of them. So realistically, as I sit here, I think I may need to be moving Trevion Henderson ahead of Breece Hall, as aggressive as that sounds. But it is something I'm going to have to think about. I am for now putting them back to back at RB16 and RB17 in my rankings. Going over to the Giants, Cam Scatterboo still has a hamstring injury, leading to Tyron Tracy to be the heavy favorite to get the job. You can kind of see this if you've been doing drafts lately on Underdog, where you do just simply have Tracy steaming up the board and Scatterboo slowly sliding back. Jackson Dart also looked really good in week 2 of the preseason, following a really strong preseason week 1 performance. So maybe you're a little more excited about Malik Neighbors if you think that there is upside at the quarterback position here with the Giants. Going over to the Bucks, Jalen McMillan gets a back/head injury. Looked pretty tough. So ultimately, this is just lining up for Igbuka to be a locked and loaded guy week 1. We already know Godwin's not going to be playing week 1, or it looks likely. But if McMillan also misses time and it's really just Igbuka and Mike Evans, Igbuka may be a top 36 wide receiver in my rankings week 1, if that is the case. And then Bucky Irving got used as a true 3-down bell cow. Bucky Irving played 18 out of 19 snaps with the starters. Now keep in mind, Rachaad White was injured, so maybe you say, oh, okay, well, when Rachaad White's healthy, that's not going to be the case. But just to know that this coaching staff believes that Bucky Irving can hold up to that volume, especially in a preseason game, it does make you raise the ceiling on Bucky Irving. Now going over to Pittsburgh, Caleb Johnson obviously is still behind Jalen Warren, where they rest Jalen Warren with the starters, but they played Kenneth Gainwell over Caleb Johnson. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you to draft Caleb Johnson as the RB3 in Pittsburgh. Hell no. But realistically, what this tells me is Caleb Johnson may not be a super impactful player through the first month of the season. So if you need some running back help in your draft, I really do like the idea of grabbing Jaylen Warren, for an example, and then maybe starting Jaylen Warren as your running back 2 through the first month of the season, and then hope that you hit on a waiver wire running back that can come in and be your long-term running back 2 if you need the help. Wink, 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 wink. All right, now Calvin Austin has missed the last 2 weeks of practice. So with this, Roman Wilson maybe is a viable round 18 pick in underdog drafts. Had a nice little catch yesterday. Going over to the Broncos, they played in more 11 personnel in this game than what we saw last year. Obviously, small sample. We don't want to take too much from it. But maybe it could be good for a player like Marvin Mims, maybe Pat Bryant. But Troy Franklin also went nuts in this game. So maybe Troy Franklin ends up finding a path to the football field. And then going over to the Cardinals, the main thing I want to point out is obviously James Conner rested with the starters, but so did Trey Benson. And I would guess, okay, well, if you are Trey Benson, where you didn't do much as a rookie, you don't really have much experience, why are you not out there? Isn't the preseason the exact opportunity for a player like that to get some reps in? I think this is super bullish for Trey Benson. Because if they are resting him, they feel confident with him. They go, you don't need the reps. We need you healthy. We have a role for you this season. I don't think you're going to be able to start him in a regular league any week that James Conner's healthy, but I think it does prove that maybe you should be a little bit more concerned with James Conner and be a little more excited about Trey Benson's upside if Conner were to get injured. And then going over to the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell was asked if Justin Jefferson's going to practice this week, and the quote is, he's definitely going to hopefully start doing more and more. I can't say what that's going to look like from a practice standpoint yet, which in my mind, I read that as, nope, Justin Jefferson's not going to practice this week. So maybe he starts practicing the 25th, aka the week before the season's here. So Justin Jefferson, I definitely would not be taking him over CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, nobody's taking him over Jamar Chase, but I wouldn't be taking him over any of the 3-down bell cows with Bijan, Gibbs, or Barkley either. But appreciate you. Ton of fun this weekend. Probably the best weekend of the year. One of the best weekends I've ever had. Appreciate all the creators coming down to Austin, Texas. We had guys traveling from Australia, Canada, freaking everywhere. Thank y'all so much. Y'all made it a phenomenal weekend. Y'all let me draft an absolute monster of a team in the league, which I could not be more excited about. And obviously, if you want to draft a monster team, make sure you take a draft sheet to your draft. That's what I did. I had a little clipboard there. I was crossing off players as they went. And if you want a draft sheet for your exact league settings with your exact platform in mind, you can find it on flockfantasy.com. I posted 50 of them. If you're not already a member of the Flock, we have the $34 season pass, which gets you access to everything on the site until January 1st, including all the draft guides, all the draft sheets, all the updated rankings, all the tools, and it's only $34, not a subscription, a one-time payment, and if you use code FLOCK, I'm going to be answering your start set questions and your trade questions in the live streams, which we're going to be doing every night during the season. But I appreciate you, and I really hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.